Good evening and welcome to Southeast Native Radio. My name is Kathy Kolkhorst Ruddy. This evening we bring you a special broadcast from the archives of KTOO-FM in Juneau. Dr. Walter Soboleff, a Tlingit elder and raven of the Dog Salmon clan, spoke with Glenda Carino in 1986 about the origins of the Sealaska Heritage Foundation celebration held every 2 years in May. Dr. Soboleff, who was born in Killisnoo near Angoon, discusses the speeches, regalia, and ceremonials of Celebration 86 and begins with the beginnings of the celebration event.
Well, as programs or as thoughts and ideas develop in people, there are always times when what we call an opportune time. And so possibly after the Alaska Native Land Claim settlement, there was an opportunity to really support the revival of Tlingit and Haida and, shall we say, Tsimshian culture as well. And so the corporations perhaps took the place of tribal and clan strength as well, economic strength, and thus the opportunity to do this came about. Now, some of our older Tlingit people who tried to come into the mainstream of Western culture felt that perhaps some of the Tlingit ways were not for the best interest of our young people. So there was a lot of discouragement to learn the culture, and even the churches and the schools took that stand. And so there were three forces generally opposing practice of Tlingit culture, and as the pendulum swung one direction, it had to swing back, and perhaps it's swinging back now to an appreciation of the culture, which I appreciate. As a matter of fact, when I went to school in Killisnoo, 99% of my schoolmates were Tlingit speaking, but we weren't permitted to speak Tlingit in the classes. We were all trying to speak the English language. And my father prohibited my sister and I from speaking the Tlingit language, and we didn't speak it. But we heard it every day on the school playgrounds, and it certainly 100% of that rubbed off on us, and without speaking it, we knew the language.
Do you think that, you said the pendulum began to swing. You came to Juneau in 1940, is that correct?
Right. I came to Juneau in 1940 to stay, but I had been coming in and out of Juneau since 1914 and 15.
When you first came to Juneau, did you see any kind of, a trade-off or having the Tlingit people or any of the native cultures try to show the Western civilization exactly what their culture was about?
Not too much. The dominant culture, of course, was Western culture in the Juneau area. So the Tlingit people were terrifically in the minority, and so they went to the American stores, they went to the American restaurant, and they were in the American economics. They were working now in the mines, getting paid for their working time. They were coming into a cash economy.
I want to talk a little bit about what we will see at Celebration 86. And looking at the program, I see a lot of dancing from a number of dance groups from all over Southeast Alaska. And I also see some storytelling and some speech making. Can you tell me a little bit about speeches? I know that I've seen at ceremonies like at the totem raising in Angoon, there was a lot of speeches. Can you tell me how those work?
Speech making in Tlingit culture in particular is a very, very specialized area. Not every Tlingit adult could or was permitted to speak in public. First, they had to know their lineage. They had to know the history of their tribe and clan and others. they had to be conversant in such a manner that they would know how to speak to the opposite tribe and clan. They would know how to respond. They would they would understand the myths and legends. And so, just to give a academic scale of this, no one who would be through the 8th grade in Tlingit culture was permitted to speak in public. No one through high school was permitted to speak in public unless he probably had 3, 4, or 5 years of understudy among his peers after he had been 17, 18, 19, 25, or 30 years of age was he permitted to speak. And then, with exception, his peers would tell him in Tlingit, "Ishkinda ak, try yourself out. Speak to this group," and if he did well, they knew he did well. If he made a few mistakes, his peers would get up and say, "You will forgive the errors he made. We will stand to correct him," and they would correct him. And so it was. But if there was no correction, it would mean ending up in a peace ceremonial, because he spoke in error to the people who listened. So it had to be just so. And then after that speaking ceremonial, we saw it this morning, there had to be a response to the speech made. Always a response.
And what is it? What is the response?
The response in this morning's situation was that we appreciate the words you gave us. You gave us words of welcome and words of comfort. You paid tribute to our people, and we want to pay tribute to your people as well.
Very polite. Also, the dancers are bedecked in traditional Tlingit and Haida and Tsimshian regalia.
Yes.
And you were telling me earlier that you can spot a traditional costume, and maybe you can explain it to me again.
Yes, the traditional costumes, of course, are the old Hudson Bay blanket type, the flannel used that was obtained in the days when they traded with the early American traders, and they made these into robes. Also, the chilkat blankets or nachen. There are very few weavers now, and you will have seen this morning, and you will see later on, there will be about 5, 10, or 15 chilkat blankets worn, and these are really authentic pieces. And you'll see ceremonial wooden hats. I saw one this morning I hadn't seen, and it was the Beaver Clan dancing hat. And these are the traditional pieces, and we'll be speaking of that when the program comes on. As we see them, I'll mention it over the PA system, and perhaps those who are monitoring it over the TV cameras will catch this too.
How old are some of these costumes?
Give it 75, 80, and 100 years or more. There'll be 2 pieces coming in from Angoon that'll be over 100 years old.
You were telling me about the price of the ceremonial piece. Can you explain that again?
Yes. For an example, a ceremonial headpiece, but let's say the dog salmon hat in particular, this is often made for the people who have that emblem, made by a member of the Eagle tribe and their clan, and it's usually made by a brother-in-law, and he'll give it to the member of the opposite tribe and clan, and they'll not exactly pay, but he'll receive a gift for making the hat, and then the new owners now will bring it to the public during a ceremonial and talk about the hat, and the owners will bring out money and give all this money to the guests, and included in that would be a ceremonial which will include the finest foods spread on the table, and there will be singing and dancing, and the singing of using the songs of the clan, receiving this new ceremonial hat. And so all these takes a certain amount of basic economics. And so the price of a ceremonial piece would be the price paid to the maker, the money given away, and the ceremony. And so there's your price for ceremonial piece. And
the tradition calls for that, but some of the ceremonial pieces that are worn these days have not gone through the tradition.
Yes, I know some pieces haven't gone through that tradition. Mm-hmm.
Does that sadden you?
Well, not especially, but I believe some of the people who are owners of this piece will one of these days put on a ceremonial to give it the traditional reception of the piece. And so when that happens, the piece isn't owned by one person, but it's owned by the whole clan.
Tell me about the ceremonials. There'll be dances here that some of the clans dance at funerals and weddings.
Yes.
And what else? What other ceremonials are there?
The ceremony of dedication of a clan house, a ceremonial for raising of a totem pole, a wedding ceremonial, a peace ceremonial, a funeral ceremonial, and a post-funeral ceremonial.
There's a post-funeral ceremonial? What is that?
That's a year or two or soon thereafter a funeral. They have a post-ceremonial, a funeral ceremonial, which would include paying off the debts incurred during the funeral. The pallbearers are paid, the people who dug the grave site, and the people who closed the grave, people who gave flowers, and all the incidental costs of funeral.
When there is
and this money is raised by the people of the deceased.
When there is a ceremonial, I notice that the best foods, and you mentioned this earlier, the best foods are laid out. The best, everything is, it's like putting on the Ritz, if you want to use that. And that costs a lot of money, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, this is the cost of ceremonies. And the nephews were always the real prime food gatherers, especially like the meats and the fish, and the women also had a part in putting up the food. So when a ceremonial was being planned, an extra amount of food was put up compared to the average amount that the family and clan would use for the winter. They put up an extra supply.
We'll see some of these at Celebration 86, but are there ceremonials still taking place?
Yes. There's a ceremonial occurring at Juneau on Saturday, and some of the dancers couldn't come here. And a post-funeral. Most of these are post-funerals now, and they had one in Angoon. The month of October is generally post-funeral ceremonials. Angoon, cake and Pabisikan, cake, and Yakutat and Klakwan and Haines.
How are you designated? And I know, is it 2 years that you're designated an elder, or do you have to do something?
One is really not recognized as a person who could appear in public unless first he has respect for himself. You know, a fellow who's careless about his living habits is not expected to get up and give speeches to people, you know. So no matter if you're well educated and even in Tlingit culture and you haven't behaved as you ought to behave, no one is listening to you.
So it is your peers then who choose you as an elder.
This is right, and you also kind of prepare your own way too. You have a part in preparation to become a spokesperson, and they call it Ankagit Audatan, speaking where the fire is aglow. See, they always had a fire in this big clan house, and around that fire people would have their ceremonials, and he couldn't speak around that fire unless he had prepared himself and when he has respect for himself, then the others have respect for him too, is the philosophy.
I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between the natives and nature. You were talking about, since you're a Presbyterian minister, and I asked you about what the relationship was between religion and nature and the Tlingit culture. Maybe you can tell me about that again.
Yes, well, see, basically, Tlingit people and the Northwest Coast people were subsistence folk, and if they didn't take care of the area in which they lived, and if they overused whatever was there, then they would jeopardize their subsistence style of living. So perhaps in that they discover that if they took care of the world of nature, it would take care of them too. And that is not to say they worshiped the world of nature, but they took care of it. Common sense, they took care of their world of nature. They never overpicked, they never overfished, and they never overkilled the four-footed animals in the woods and mammals of the sea. They always just took enough because they knew that they'd have to go back again, and their food stock would always be in balance. They tried to live in balance with nature. Perhaps we might say they were the environmental people, environmental conservationists, That's how they lived.
Tell me about the spirit again.
The Tlingit believed he had a spirit above him. They called this Hashagenya, the spirit above you, and you had to conduct your life in such a manner that you would not offend the spirit, and the spirit would not punish you.
You have been listening to an interview of Dr. Walter Soboleff, an interview by Glenda Carino in 1986. We continue with music from R. Corlos Nakai and William Eaton. We continue with more music of R. Carlos Nakai and William Eaton. That was Sun March. Next is On Painted Wing. been listening to an interview with Walter Soboleff of Teneke, followed by Native American flute music with R. Carlos Nakai and William Eaton. This program was produced in the studios of KTOO-FM in Juneau. My name is Kathy Kolkhorst Ruddy. Thank you for listening to Southeast Native Radio.